If you have ever been treated like a problem to be managed instead of a person to be loved, keep listening. My name is Henry Carson. Friends call me Hank. I am 71 years old. I am American. I used to run maintenance crews at a paper mill in Indiana for most of my adult life. For decades, my hands smelled like machine oil and hot metal, and my days had a rhythm I could trust. Clocks, shifts, lunch pails, small talk by the loading dock, the steady hum of work that made sense. Then my wife died on a Tuesday. Denise went from laughing at a rerun on Monday night to staring past me in a hospital bed by Tuesday morning. A stroke. Fast, clean, unfair. The kind of event that turns a home into a museum in a single afternoon. I kept expecting the front door to click and her voice to drift down the hallway. Then the silence would answer back and remind me that I had become a one-person world. After the funeral, the house felt too big. The rooms held her absence like water holds cold. My daughter Kelsey drove over every day for a week. She brought casseroles and paper plates and that bright, careful smile people wear when they do not know what to do with grief. Her husband Mark came once, stayed 15 minutes, and spent most of it checking his phone near the doorway. Kelsey insisted I should not be alone. A different place for a while. A fresh start. Just until things settled. Just until I figured out my next step. Just until. I sold my house because it was easier than fighting the look in her eyes when she worried about me. Because I loved her. Because I still had the old habit of doing what I could to keep my family from carrying weight. The sale went quickly. Denise and I had owned the place outright. A modest ranch home with a small deck and a backyard where she grew tomatoes and argued with squirrels. The closing check was not huge, but it was enough for a small apartment and a quiet retirement. I never got the chance to use it. A week after closing, a contractor found mold behind the shower wall in Kelsey's house. The repairs were expensive. Kelsey and Mark had savings, but not much. A month later, their car needed a transmission. Then Mark's work hours dropped. Then, somehow, I was sleeping in their guest room, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself I was helping, telling myself I should not be picky at my age. Temporary has a way of growing roots. Their house sat in a tidy subdivision outside Columbus. 2 stories, beige siding, a Ring doorbell, a living room staged like a catalog. The guest room had floral curtains and a bed with a squeaky frame. I brought 1 suitcase and a shoebox of pictures. I shared myself I would stay 3 weeks. 3 weeks became 3 months. 3 months became a year that started and ended with the same sentence. We will figure something out soon. Kelsey tried at first. She did. She would knock on my door in the mornings and bring coffee, a mug with chipped blue paint that used to belong to Denise. We would sit at the kitchen island and talk about nothing. She would laugh too loudly at my jokes, as if laughter could fill holes like spackle. Mark did not like noise in the morning. Mark liked a quiet house. Mark liked rules that made him comfortable. Slowly, the house changed shape around me. The thermostat stayed at 66 no matter how cold it got outside. When I turned it up, Mark would turn it down again before the hour ended. The pantry shelf where my cereal lived moved higher, as if my food needed to disappear. My mail started showing up opened. My bank statements would be folded neatly and placed on the counter, like a message. I learned to keep my wallet in my pocket. I learned to carry my keys even when I walked to the mailbox. I learned to keep my Social Security card in a book at the bottom of my suitcase. And I learned to hear the word that changed everything. Concern. Concern wrapped itself around every sharp edge. Concern was the sugar coating on every control. Kelsey. Dad, you look tired. Mark. Maybe the trip to the mailbox is too much. Kelsey. It could be grief. Mark. Or age. I was not frail. I was stiff in the mornings, sure. My knees complained and my shoulders popped like bubble wrap. But I could still lift a 50-pound bag of salt into the trunk of Mark's car. I could still fix a leaking sink. I could still remember every number in my old employee badge, even though the badge had been gone for 10 years. The house did not need proof of my weakness. The house needed a story. That story arrived on a Saturday in October. Kelsey hosted a neighborhood fall get-together for the kids. Paper pumpkins on the windows, orange napkins, a crock pot of cider. Mark stayed in the kitchen and played host in a way that looked friendly from far away and felt sharp up close like a smile with teeth. I spent most of the day in the guest room, pretending to nap, because it was easier than listening to people ask how I was doing and watching them flinch when my answer was honest. Late afternoon, the noise faded. The last car door slammed. I heard Kelsey in the kitchen, cleaning. I heard Mark's steps, heavy, impatient. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I had forgotten it on the kitchen counter earlier. I went to get it. The hallway was quiet. The kitchen light was on. I saw movement at the table. Kelsey and Mark sat there with papers spread out in a careful line. A brochure, a folder with legal tabs, a yellow notepad covered in neat handwriting. Mark's laptop open with a page full of bullet points. My feet stopped before my brain caught up. A sentence drifted through the doorway. Before it gets messy. Another. Evaluation first. My pulse jumped. A weight settled in my throat. I stood still, half in shadow, half in light, like someone caught between two lives. Kelsey's voice carried the word again. Concern. The folder's top page faced the doorway at an angle. Big text in the header. Petition for guardianship. The air in my lungs turned thick. Mark tapped the folder with one finger like a judge tapping a gavel. Kelsey's hands shook as she flipped a page. Mark's mouth moved. His tone stayed level. The kind of level that makes anger look like logic. I did not step into the room. I did not clear my throat. I did not announce my presence. My body understood something my mind resisted. If they were doing this openly, the decision had already been made. I backed away and returned to the guest room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands pressed on my knees, the mattress groaning under me like a tired animal. The scene replayed itself with brutal detail. The folder, the brochure, the clean lines of a plan. There was a time, years ago, when I would have confronted Mark. The old Hank would have walked in and demanded an explanation. The old Hank would have used his voice like a tool and expected the world to respond to it. That Hank had been buried beside Denise, apparently. A different part of me woke up instead. A quieter part. A part that understood leverage and timing because life had taught me that yelling rarely fixes anything, and silence can be a weapon if you learn how to hold it. I waited. At dinner, I ate my chicken and rice and nodded at Mark's small talk. I smiled at Kelsey. I washed my plate. I shared them the cider had been nice. Then I went back to my room and pulled a thin envelope from the bottom of my suitcase. I had not opened it in months. The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper, the kind law offices still use when they want their letters to feel heavier than they are. It came from Chicago. It had arrived 2 weeks after Denise's funeral and sat unopened on my kitchen counter until Kelsey visited and stacked my mail into neat piles, taking control without meaning to, or maybe meaning to. I opened it alone that night. A letter from a firm called Hart and Lasky. It began with condolences and ended with a name I had not thought about in years. Evelyn Hart. Aunt Ev. Denise's aunt. A retired judge. No children. A quiet woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who used to send Denise birthday cards with handwritten notes that felt like advice disguised as love. The letter explained that Evelyn had created a trust years earlier. A trust with an unusual structure. The beneficiary was Denise first, then me if Denise passed, then a list of secondary beneficiaries that included Kelsey, but only under certain conditions. The amount was large enough to change a life. The conditions were designed to prevent it from changing the wrong life. Aunt Ev had spent decades in court watching families tear each other apart when money entered the room. She had watched older people become targets. She had watched children become accountants. She had watched help become control, and control become theft, and theft become a polite family story no one wanted to admit. So she wrote the trust like a test. There was a primary clause called the Dignity Clause. The trust would release funds for the beneficiary's housing, care, legal protection, and quality of life, only if the beneficiary remained autonomous. Any attempt by a family member to force guardianship, force institutionalization, or interfere with medical choices would trigger the diversion clause. The diversion clause was simple. If coercion occurred, the trust would divert the remaining funds away from the family entirely. It would fund a nonprofit providing emergency legal aid and housing for elders at risk of exploitation. There was a second clause called the Transparency Clause. If the family needed help, they could receive it only through structured support. Debt counseling, monitored payments, strict reporting, and therapy attendance, with funds going directly to creditors, never to personal accounts. Any fraud, forged signatures, secret loans, or financial manipulation would lock the family out permanently. Aunt Ev was a judge even in death. Denise had known about it. She had never needed it. We had been fine. She kept the letter as a just in case. I did not blame her. Denise believed in planning the way some people believe in prayer. I had never mentioned the trust to Kelsey or Mark. Grief had swallowed my ability to think about money. The letter went back into my suitcase. It became one more thing in a world of too many things. Now the paper felt alive in my hands. Not because it promised riches, because it promised safety. I read the trust summary again and again. I read the language until it sharpened into certainty. I was not powerless. I was also not safe. A guardianship petition could be filed quickly. A friendly doctor could produce a report. A hearing could happen before I even understood the calendar. People in my position ended up in facilities every day, bewildered, broke, and silenced, their lives reduced to signature lines and polite smiles. I did not want to become a case. I wanted to remain a person. The next morning, I behaved like nothing had changed. I made coffee. I watched the news quietly. I folded my blanket. I wondered Kelsey about the kids' school. I fixed the loose hinge on the pantry door because it bothered Mark, and I thought maybe small usefulness could buy peace. At the same time, I began to watch the house with new eyes. The brochure on the table became a clue. The folder on Mark's desk became a signpost. The brochure was for a place called Willow Ridge Senior Living. Soft green logo. Pictures of smiling white-haired couples walking on a manicured path. It looked like a vacation brochure. The fine print shared a different story. Memory support. Managed medication. Financial coordination. There were also smaller changes, almost invisible unless you were looking for them. My pill organizer moved locations. The notepad where I wrote grocery items disappeared. A calendar appeared on the fridge with appointments in Mark's handwriting, none of them discussed with me. Then a new behavior arrived from Mark. Questions. Not direct questions. Not anything that sounded like an interrogation. Questions disguised as conversation. A story about a neighbor's grandmother losing her mind. A mention of a co-worker's father who needed help managing money. A casual comment about scams older people fall for. Each time, Mark watched my reaction out of the corner of his eye, like a fisherman watching a bobber for movement. Kelsey grew quieter. She spent more time in her phone, more time in the laundry room, more time anywhere she could be without looking at me for too long. When she did look, Guilt flickered across her face like a porch light with a dying bulb. I kept my face soft, my answers short, my posture slightly slumped. Not enough to appear gone, just enough to appear tired. At night, when the house slept, I used my phone in the bathroom with the fan on. I searched for elder law attorneys in Columbus. I picked one name, Andrew Collins. Strong reviews, former public defender. Experience with contested guardianships. Calm, careful language in his profile, not flashy. I requested a consultation through the website form. I used a different email account. I booked a time during Kelsey's workday and Mark's gym hour. The following Thursday, I took an Uber to Andrew's office. I wore my oldest coat and walked slowly, leaning on a cane I did not need because perception mattered. Andrew was mid-40s, wireframe glasses, a voice that sounded steady, like a bridge that had been tested by storms. He listened for a long time without interruption. When I finished describing the folder, the brochure, the plan, Andrew exhaled slowly. "You have documentation of the trust?" The word documentation carried weight. No dramatics, no judgment, just steps. I placed the trust summary on his desk. Andrew read. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed together. A small nod formed at the end, as if he had met an old enemy in written form and recognized it instantly. "This trust is a fortress," he noted, then stopped himself, switched to a more neutral tone. "This trust is strong, very strong." He outlined options. A formal letter to Kelsey and Mark establishing that I had counsel and did not consent to guardianship or placement. A proactive medical evaluation by a neurologist of my choosing, establishing competence, documented and notarized. A private mailbox for sensitive mail. A new bank account at a different institution, with statements sent electronically only. Security steps for my phone and email. Most importantly, a plan to move out quickly before the house could tighten its grip. "I can't leave yet," I shared him, careful to avoid words that would turn into an argument. "Not until I know how far they will go." Andrew watched me for a moment, weighing risk. The kind of look a professional gives when they want to keep you safe, but also respect your agency. "Then we prepare," he offered. "Preparation makes their story harder to sell." That became our work. Over the next 3 weeks, I did 3 independent evaluations. A cognitive screening with a licensed neuropsychologist, a full-hour assessment, dates, memory tasks, problem-solving, numbers, names, patterns. My brain did what it always did. It worked. The report was clear, competent, no evidence of dementia, grief-related depression possible, recommended counseling, not guardianship, a primary care visit with a doctor chosen from Andrew's referrals, full physical, medication review, blood work, notes and signatures. Again, competent. A counseling session with a grief therapist. Honest discussion of Denise. The silence, the anger, the fear. Again, oriented, rational, capable of decisions. Andrew kept copies of everything. He stored them both digitally and physically. He prepared affidavits and contacts. He also requested a copy of my credit report. Clean. No surprises, no secret loans, no weird accounts. That mattered. Meanwhile, in Kelsey's house, the pressure increased. It started with the car keys. My old Buick sat in the garage. Denise and I had bought it 10 years earlier. It ran fine. I used it twice a week for errands and church. Then, one morning, the keys were not on the hook. I searched calmly. I checked my pockets. I checked the drawer. Mark stood near the counter, coffee in hand, watching. A faint smile hovered in the corners of his mouth. Kelsey's face tightened. "Maybe they're in your room," she offered, voice too light. They were not in my room. The keys appeared 2 days later on the hook again, as if nothing had happened. It continued with my mail. The envelope from my bank came already slit open. The credit card offers arrived torn in half. For my protection. My pharmacy statements appeared in a pile on Mark's desk. It was subtle, but the message was loud. Control was being practiced. Then the thermostat dropped to 64 at night. My room became an icebox. I woke up with fingers that refused to bend until I ran them under warm water. Kelsey noticed, or pretended to. A blanket appeared on my bed. A new one, scratchy, cheap. It felt like a gesture for an audience. Mark's behavior sharpened further. Small criticisms about my confusion. A misplaced spoon turned into a concerned glance. A pause in a sentence turned into a note on a pad. A comment about Denise, spoken softly at dinner, turned into a long silence, and a look exchanged between Kelsey and Mark, as if grief were evidence. Then came the appointment. A sticky note on the fridge. Tuesday, 10 a.m., Dr. Porter, house visit. No conversation, no warning, no consent. My heart thumped once, slow and heavy, like a door closing in the distance. Andrew received a photo of the sticky note within the hour. Another photo followed. A brochure for Willow Ridge placed on the coffee table like a stage prop. Andrew's response arrived in a short email. Do not be alone with them during the visit. I will attend. Tuesday morning arrived with bright sun and cold air. Kelsey hovered, nervous. Mark cleaned the living room twice, moving furniture by inches, adjusting pillows, creating the picture he wanted a stranger to see. The kids left for school. The house became quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Mark guided me into the living room armchair, the big one by the window, a blanket over my knees, my posture framed like a scene. Kelsey sat on the couch, hands clasped. Her eyes flickered to the front door every few seconds, like she was waiting for a verdict. Mark stood behind the chair, close enough to feel like a guard. At 9:58, the doorbell rang. Mark's smile appeared, clean and professional. A man entered wearing a neat jacket and carrying a leather bag. Mid-50s, confident walk, eyes scanning the room, the expression of someone who expected to be obeyed. Dr. Porter. Mark extended a hand. Kelsey offered a bright greeting. The doctor's eyes landed on me. Good morning, Mr. Carson, he began, voice smooth. No reply from me yet. I let a beat pass. The blanket stayed on my knees. The room stayed still. I offered a polite nod. The doctor pulled a chair close and opened a pad. His voice flowed with practiced warmth. A few questions. Just routine. Just to help the family plan. Just to make sure everything was safe. Andrew arrived at 10:03, a firm knock, calm timing, a sound that shifted the room's balance. Mark opened the door. His face stiffened as Andrew stepped inside. Andrew's suit fit him like armor, not flashy, not weak, a folder in his hand. Henry's counsel, Andrew offered, holding out a card. Mark's smile tightened, then froze in place, like plastic left in the sun. Kelsey's eyes widened, panic flickered. Dr. Porter's posture shifted, a tiny recalibration. Andrew entered the living room without asking permission. He placed his folder on the coffee table and looked at Dr. Porter. Before any evaluation proceeds, there are 2 points, Andrew stated, voice even. Consent and qualifications. Dr. Porter's mouth opened, closed. A polite, practiced expression formed. I was invited by the family, he offered. Andrew's eyes stayed level. Henry is the patient. Henry holds consent. Henry has not invited you. Henry also has documentation from independent specialists establishing competence. Mark stepped forward. A hand lifted slightly, as if to push Andrew back with air. This is unnecessary, Mark attempted. We're helping. He's vulnerable. Andrew turned his head slightly, like a man acknowledging a buzzing insect. Guardianship paperwork has been prepared in this house, Andrew continued. A brochure for Willow Ridge was placed as part of a narrative. A house visit has been scheduled without Henry's consent. That is coercion. Kelsey's face drained of color. Dr. Porter glanced at the folder on the table. His eyes narrowed. What exactly is being alleged? Andrew slid a single page forward. A formal letter. Clear language. Dates. The phrase, potential undue influence, printed near the top. The doctor read quickly. His eyes moved faster near the end. A small silence followed. Then another. Kelsey's hands trembled. Mark's jaw clenched. His shoulders rose. His body tried to become larger. The doctor set the page down. I will not be participating, he stated, voice suddenly less warm. Not under these conditions. Mark's face reddened. This is ridiculous. Andrew shifted his gaze to me. The room waited for my weakness. The room waited for my confusion. The room waited for the old man under the blanket to prove their story true. I straightened slowly. My back cracked once. Quiet. I lifted the blanket off my knees and folded it neatly. My hands did not shake. My eyes stayed focused. So thank you for coming, doctor, I offered, calm. This visit is not needed. Dr. Porter packed his pad into the leather bag. His eyes avoided Mark's. The front door opened again. The doctor stepped out. The air of the house changed, as if a pressure valve had released. Mark stood in the living room, breathing hard. Kelsey looked like she might cry or run or both. Andrew stayed seated, grounded. A hand rested on his folder, a quiet signal that he was not leaving until the situation was stable. Mark attempted a laugh. Hollow, sharp. So now you have a lawyer. Andrew's gaze lifted. Yes. Mark's eyes snapped to me. This is what you want? To make us the enemy? A long time ago, I would have apologized. I would have tried to soothe. I would have taken responsibility for emotions that were not mine. Denise's promise returned like a hand on my shoulder. Do not let them take your dignity. My voice stayed steady. This is what I need. Safety. Kelsey flinched. Her lips moved. A sentence formed. A question hung behind her teeth, desperate and complicated. The words came out anyway, thin. Why now? Andrew leaned forward slightly and slid another page across the table. A copy of the trust summary. The header at the top read, The Evelyn Hart Dignity Trust. Kelsey's eyes widened. Mark leaned in, pupils sharp, scanning for the dollar amount. He found it. His breath caught. The room felt smaller. Mark's hands gripped the back of the armchair. His knuckles whitened. A low sound escaped his throat, half disbelief, half hunger. Kelsey read slower. Her eyes moved over the clauses, the language, the conditions. Her face changed. Confusion, fear, hope, shame, all flickering in rapid rotation. Mark reached the dignity clause and the diversion clause. He looked up. So if we try to get you help, we lose it? The word help had the taste of poison. Andrew's voice stayed level. Any coercion triggers diversion away from the family. Mark's posture stiffened. But that's insane. Kelsey kept reading. She reached the transparency clause and her eyes stopped on the words, structured support only and no direct disbursement. Her shoulders sagged. The truth dropped into the room like a heavy tool. The money was real. The money was also not theirs to grab. The trust required them to treat me like a human being first. Mark's face darkened. He turned the pages as if speed could change meaning. Who wrote this? Denise's aunt, Andrew responded. A judge. Mark's lip curled. Dead judges making decisions for living people. I watched him. I watched the anger gather. Anger is easier than shame. Anger allows a person to pretend they are righteous. Kelsey's eyes filled with tears. Her mouth trembled. A part of me wanted to take her hand. A part of me wanted to rescue her from her own choices. That part was familiar. It had built my life. A different part held still and waited. Because this was not just about money. This was about the word problem. Kelsey's voice came out quiet, almost childlike. We weren't trying to hurt you. Mark snapped his head toward her, a look like a warning. The house felt like two people and a script that had begun to tear. Andrew's voice cut through the tension with professional precision. Today's attempt at an evaluation without consent is documented. The trust has protections, but it also has expectations. From this point forward, there will be boundaries. Mark's fingers tightened on the chair. Boundaries. Andrew nodded. Henry will choose his medical providers. Henry will control his mail. Henry will control his finances. Henry will decide where he lives. Kelsey wiped her face, then stopped, as if remembering she was supposed to look composed. Mark's voice lowered. Where will he live? He doesn't have anywhere. My voice filled the space without effort. I have somewhere. Mark's eyes sharpened. With what money? Andrew's hand tapped the trust summary lightly. So with funds released for independent housing, as long as Henry remains autonomous. Mark's jaw tightened. He stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. Kelsey's eyes shifted to me. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Then shame returned, heavier. My heart did not celebrate. My heart did not want revenge. My heart wanted a simple thing, not to be managed like an appliance. The conversation ended without a dramatic explosion. It ended the way many family truths end, with a quiet collapse of pretense. Andrew left after securing written acknowledgement that no further evaluations would occur without consent and counsel present. A formal letter would follow. Mark refused to sign anything. Kelsey did. Her hands shook when the pen touched paper. That afternoon, Mark stayed in the garage for hours, cleaning, slamming drawers, creating noise as protest. Kelsey avoided my eyes. That night, dinner arrived on the table like a peace offering. More food than usual. Warm. A careful smile from Kelsey. Silence from Mark. I ate slowly, tasting the new atmosphere. Politeness built on fear. Fear is not love. I moved out 8 days later. Andrew arranged the apartment. A small one-bedroom unit near a riverwalk in a quieter part of town. Second floor, elevator building, bright windows, a small balcony with space for a chair and a cup of coffee. The trust released the first housing payment directly to the landlord. It also released funds for a moving service. A simple agreement. No drama. Clean transactions. On moving day, Kelsey helped fold my shirts. She moved around the room like a person trying to repair something without knowing where the break was. Mark stayed downstairs, arms crossed, watching the movers carry my boxes out. His eyes followed every step like he was searching for hidden cash under my socks. The car ride to my new apartment felt like air entering lungs that had been held tight for too long. The first night alone was quiet, but it was a different quiet than the one in my old house after Denise died. This quiet belonged to me. I chose when the lights turned off. I chose the temperature. I chose which chair held my body and which room held my memories. I slept 8 hours without waking once. The next morning, coffee tasted better. Not because the beans were different, because my shoulders were not braced for someone's footsteps behind me. Kelsey called 3 days later. Her name lit up my phone screen. My hand hovered. My thumb hesitated. I responded. Her breathing sounded uneven. The background was quiet. Dad, are you okay? No reply from me for a moment. Silence can be an answer too. I'm okay, I offered finally. Simple. Are you? A pause. A soft sound like a sob being swallowed. Mark is furious. My eyes closed. My mind pictured him in the garage, slamming drawers. Mark feels embarrassed, I corrected gently. Fury is his armor. Kelsey's voice thinned. He thinks you're punishing us. A slow inhale. A slow exhale. This is not punishment. This is distance. Kelsey's words tumbled out, rushed. We were under pressure, Dad. We thought you were slipping. We thought you needed help. The word help returned again, twisted into justification. A long time passed before my response arrived. Not because I needed to find words, but because I needed to choose them carefully. Help does not start with paperwork behind a person's back. Kelsey's breath hitched. Silence returned, thick and aching. Mark thinks we should contest the trust, she admitted, shame heavy in the sentence. Andrew had predicted this. Some people do not let go of control. They only change tactics. The trust cannot be contested without evidence of wrongdoing, I offered. Aunt Ev wrote it precisely. Kelsey's voice grew small. Mark thinks you're hiding more. I stared at my kitchen wall. The paint was clean. No memories stuck to it yet. That felt comforting and sad at the same time. There is no more, I offered. There is only a condition. Another pause. Then Kelsey's next sentence arrived quietly, almost like a confession. There is something else, Dad. My stomach tightened. Kelsey continued, voice lower. Mark took out a loan last year, a business loan. He used the house as collateral. He never shared me. He never shared me the payments were behind. The air in my lungs turned cold. Not because of money, because of the pattern. Secrets. Control. For your benefit. Kelsey's voice became thinner. He thought your money would cover it. There it was. The core truth. Not worry about my health. Not grief, not love, a plan, a rescue fantasy built on my vulnerability. Kelsey continued. He's talking about selling the house. He's talking about moving the kids to his sister's place for a while. I pictured my grandchildren, 2 teenagers who mostly lived behind headphones, but whose world could still crack in half when adults made selfish decisions. Kelsey's words slowed. He's also talking about another evaluation, another petition. My jaw tightened. My hands curled slightly on the edge of the counter. Aunt Ev's clauses rose in my mind like steel beams. Dignity clause, diversion clause, transparency clause. The trust could protect me. It could also protect others if I used it correctly. Andrew received a call within minutes after I ended mine with Kelsey. He did not panic. He did not dramatize. His voice stayed steady. A second attempt at guardianship becomes a trigger, he reminded me. If Mark pushes, the family loses any eligibility. Full diversion. Kelsey's kids might lose access to education support that could exist if the family complied. That mattered. I stared out my window at the river. The water moved steadily, not caring about human greed. I want to give Kelsey a chance, I offered. Not Mark. Kelsey. Andrew paused. The kind of pause that meant he was building a legal structure while I spoke. That is possible, he offered. The trust can establish a separate education sub-trust for the grandchildren, controlled by an independent trustee, not their parents. Kelsey would need to sign financial transparency agreements and protective clauses. Mark would be excluded. It sounded harsh. It sounded like splitting a family with legal documents. But the family had already been split by lies. Papers simply made it visible. Andrew drafted an offer letter. Not for Mark. For Kelsey. The offer contained 3 options. Option 1. Compliance. Kelsey would agree in writing to stop all guardianship talk, return control of my mail and information, and allow independent check-ins. She would also agree to disclose all household debts and financial commitments, including Mark's loan. In exchange, the trust would consider structured support, direct payments to essential creditors for the purpose of stabilizing the grandchildren's housing and school continuity, managed by an independent fiduciary. Option 2. Separation. Kelsey would begin legal separation from Mark and pursue counseling. The trust would fund temporary housing for Kelsey and the kids, direct to landlord, and provide legal representation for the separation process, along with monitored debt counseling. Option 3. Diversion. Any further coercion would trigger diversion, locking the family out and redirecting funds to elder protection charities. Kelsey would receive nothing. Mark would receive nothing. Only the nonprofit would benefit. The letter was firm, clean, no emotion. That mattered. Emotion invites arguments. Clarity invites choices. Andrew delivered the letter through certified mail, a paper trail that could not be reimagined later. 2 days passed. Then Kelsey arrived at my apartment unannounced. Her eyes were swollen. Her hair looked like it had not been brushed. A woman worn down by grief and fear and marriage. She stood in the doorway, hands twisting together. A long silence filled the room. The river's light flickered on the wall behind her. She finally stepped inside. Her gaze landed on my small living room, my clean kitchen, my single-framed photo of Denise on the shelf. "You look calmer," she offered. I nodded slowly. Her lips trembled. I did not know how bad it had gotten. The truth came in fragments. Mark's loan, missed payments, threats of foreclosure if they missed another month. Mark's shrinking work hours, pride wounded, pressure building. A plan forming quietly. Move me into Willow Ridge, control my finances, use my presence as leverage. Kelsey admitted it without excuses, voice quiet and broken. A story she had been helping write, even while hating herself for it. "I felt trapped," she admitted. "I thought, if you were safe somewhere, at least we could breathe." My chest tightened, not from anger, from grief. Grief for Denise. Grief for the daughter I thought I had raised to be brave. "Breathing should not require stealing someone else's air," I offered softly. Kelsey nodded, tears spilling now without fight. "Mark is not stopping," she breathed. "He keeps talking about what you owe us. He keeps talking about how you turned on us." My eyes closed briefly, then opened again, clear. "The trust offers you a door," I reminded her. "A real door, not a trap door." Kelsey looked down. Her hands shook. A long silence. Then a small sentence, quiet, heavy. "I want option 2. The word 2 landed like a stone. Separation. Kelsey's eyes lifted. A new kind of fear lived there, but also something else. Relief. "I can't do this anymore," she admitted. "Not to you. Not to the kids. Not to myself." Andrew moved quickly. Within 48 hours, Kelsey had a consultation with a family law attorney funded by the trust, direct payment. She also had a temporary housing option lined up, a 2-bedroom apartment near the kids' school, paid directly by the trust for 3 months, with an extension contingent on continued counseling and financial transparency. Mark exploded. The first text message arrived at midnight, then another, then 5 more. Angry, accusatory, threatening. Kelsey forwarded them to Andrew. Andrew filed for a temporary restraining order the same week. Mark's anger shifted from private to public. He showed up at my building one afternoon, standing near the lobby door like a man who believed loudness created authority. I did not meet him alone. Andrew met him instead, in the parking lot, in daylight, in front of security cameras. A firm voice, a clear boundary, a warning. Trespassing would become a criminal matter. Mark's face turned red. His mouth moved. His hands made sharp gestures. No words from him reached me. The glass door of the lobby stayed closed. That mattered. Distance again. Safety again. Kelsey's separation progressed. Counseling sessions began. The kids adjusted, sullen and confused at first, then slowly calmer as stability returned. Their world stopped shaking, even if it still felt cracked. The trust provided structured support for essentials only. Rent, utilities, school supplies, therapy, legal fees. No shopping sprees. No cash. No escape routes for Mark's habits. Mark attempted to challenge the trust in court. He claimed undue influence. He claimed manipulation. He claimed that the clauses were unfair. A judge reviewed the trust's structure, the documentation, the independent evaluations, the evidence of coercion attempts, the text messages, the timeline. Mark's challenge failed before it could grow teeth. Aunt Ev's fortress held. 3 months after Kelsey moved out, I received a single envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a copy of a foreclosure notice on the house Mark still occupied, now alone. Mark's name on it, a date for auction. I stared at it for a long time. The old Hank would have driven to the house, knocked on the door, and offered rescue, offered payment, offered sacrifice. Because that had always been my role. Fixer, buffer, quiet hero. Denise's face rose in my mind. Her hospital bed, her thin hand holding mine. Her promise. Do not let them take your dignity. I handed the notice to Andrew. Andrew scanned it quickly. He has options, Andrew offered. None of them involve you. I nodded. Mark lost the house. He moved in with his sister across town. His messages stopped. The silence that followed felt like the end of a storm. Kelsey rebuilt slowly. Not a dramatic transformation, not a movie montage. Real-life rebuild. Budgets, therapy, awkward conversations with teenagers, late-night tears, mornings that still felt heavy, then mornings that felt a little lighter. I did not become her bank. I became her father again, carefully, with boundaries. Sunday dinners returned, not weekly at first, but once a month. A small table in Kelsey's new apartment, store-bought chicken, real laughter, not forced. Trust conditions continued. Transparency, counseling, autonomy, respect. No more brochures on coffee tables. No more folders with tabs. 1 year after moving into my apartment, the trust entered its final phase. Aunt Ev had planned that too. The remaining funds, after my lifetime support and the grandchildren's education subtrust, would fund an elder protection initiative. Not a vague charity, a legal program, a hotline, emergency housing, court representation, a rapid response team for people in my position who heard the click of a lock and realized too late what it meant. Andrew proposed the structure, a nonprofit called the Dignity Line. I did not choose the name because it sounded heroic. I chose it because it sounded simple and true. Dignity is not a luxury. Dignity is a right. The first case came in less than a month after launch. An 80-year-old woman in Dayton living with her nephew. Heat turned off. Mail stolen. A friend doctor scheduled to do an evaluation. The pattern was familiar. The legal team moved fast. The woman moved into a safe apartment within 48 hours. The nephew received a letter he did not understand until court. The judge granted protection. The woman kept her pension. She kept her name. The second case came in 2 weeks after that. A widower in Toledo whose daughter had drained his savings and tried to place him in a facility. His bank account had already been managed, his phone taken, his paperwork organized. The Dignity Line filed emergency motions. The court appointed an independent guardian ad litem to assess. The daughter's story collapsed under evidence. The man moved into independent housing. He bought his own groceries again. He smiled at the sunlight like it was new. When the third case came, my hands shook slightly while I read the intake summary. Not from fear, from recognition. A man in a guest room. A man hearing the word problem. A man watching a brochure appear like a prophecy. I sat on my balcony, river wind on my face, coffee warm in my hands, and understood something that surprised me. The money had never been the point. The clauses were the point. Aunt Ev had not left a fortune. She had left a tool that turned human decency into a requirement, not a suggestion. A year and a half after the guardianship folder appeared on Kelsey's table, I received a message from Kelsey's oldest child, my grandson Wyatt. Wyatt was 16. Quiet, guarded. A kid who used sarcasm the way Mark used anger, armor. The message was short. "Grandpa, can we talk?" Wyatt arrived at my apartment after school and sat on the couch, shoulders hunched, backpack on the floor. He stared at his hands for a long time before words arrived. He had seen the papers that day, the folder, the brochure, the plan. He had heard Mark's voice behind the kitchen wall. He had heard his mother crying in the laundry room later. Wyatt carried it like a secret weight. He looked up finally, eyes sharp, older than 16. "I thought grown-ups were supposed to protect people," he admitted. I nodded slowly. "Sometimes grown-ups protect themselves first," I offered. "That is why we teach the next generation better." Wyatt's jaw tightened. A long breath left his lungs. "I'm glad you left," he admitted. "I hated how it felt in that house. Like we were all waiting for something to happen. Like you were trapped." The word trapped struck deep. Wyatt swallowed hard. "Mom is trying. I see it." I nodded again. Wyatt's voice lowered. Is it true that if Mark had done it, he would have gotten everything?" I shook my head. "The trust would have diverted. The more control he tried, the less he could touch." Wyatt's shoulders loosened slightly, as if that justice mattered to him. He stared at the river through my window. "So it was like a trap for bad people." A small smile formed on my face. Not a happy smile, a knowing one. "It was a test," I offered. "A test that rewards decency." Wyatt nodded slowly. He stood up, slung his backpack over one shoulder, and paused at the door. "Grandpa," he offered, voice rough. "Thanks for not letting them do it." He left. The door clicked softly. The apartment returned to quiet. I sat down in my chair and looked at Denise's photo on the shelf. I had kept my promise. Not perfectly, not without pain, not without loss, but I had kept it. No one had taken my dignity, and because of that, a lot of other people would keep theirs too. If your family ever makes you feel small, if they use concern like a leash, if paperwork appears when love disappears, remember one thing. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a person. And being human is enough.